100 books a year is one of the biggest reading traps I have seen in the past couple of years. If you go on YouTube right now and search that exact phrase, an insane amount of information on the topic comes up. Thomas Hobbes once said that if he read as many books as most men do, he would be as dull-witted as they are. Like Hobbes, I believe that reading 100 books a year is one of the biggest time wasters that you can do. I will start by talking about the problems with reading 100 books per year, what solution I'm offering, and finally, what happens when you read fewer books. The first issue with reading so many books is there is no clear definition of what a book is in the first place. I mean, think about it. Most people would call something like the Iliad a book, but these same people would give something only 100 pages long that label as well. The difference is that the Iliad is an epic 800-page long poem on the story of Achilles, whereas most books are shorter than 200 pages. If you set the goal to read 100 books a year, which book do you think you will be more likely to choose? The one that's over 800 pages long, or the book that can be finished in a single sitting? There are so many fantastic books that people will just never read, as they are way too long to fit with their reading goals. I'm reading the Iliad right now for around 30 minutes before going to bed. If I forced myself to read some set number of books per year, I don't know if I would have the guts to read such a long book. The second problem is that reading 100 books a year will likely make you read just in case knowledge. Just in case knowledge is knowledge that you don't read right now, but might need later on. Just in time knowledge is knowledge that you can use to help with a problem you're facing right now. There is no way that every one of the 100 books you choose to read deals with a problem you're facing right in the present. One of the best ways to retain and utilize the information from reading is to put it into action right away. If you're struggling with an issue of personal finance, it would be a great time to pick up a personal finance book. Not only will you be motivated to read more to solve your issue, but you'll also retain much more of the information as you implement it right after. When I read Your Money, The Missing Manual a couple of weeks ago, I learned that I was spending an embarrassingly large amount of money on coffee at Bare Necessities in Cornell every morning. So much coffee. There are some exceptions to this issue, one being that you have an effective second brain storage system. If you don't know what a second brain is, check out the video up above. In this case, if you find a just-in-case book interesting, you can read it anyways, as you can be confident that information will show up in your second brain for use at some point. The third issue with reading 100 books is that it makes your to-be-R or to-be-read list massive. When you read that many books, you don't have time to carefully pick through and choose every book on your list. You start to accrue books as soon as you hear one recommendation or see a single reference to it somewhere online. You will probably resort to the best-selling list to find the next book to read. The problem is that best-selling means precisely that. Best-selling. These books aren't necessarily well-written and don't have information useful to humanity. Because they're best-selling, they have been read by many, many people, meaning their information won't be scarce. As an independent researcher, it's more beneficial for you to read and spread ideas on less well-known sources. To make matters worse, having a huge to-be-R list makes it harder to enjoy reading books. You constantly feel that there is probably another better book on your list while reading because there probably is. I deleted my to-be-R list a couple of months ago because I wanted to enjoy every book that I was reading at the moment. The change has been amazing. The fourth issue is that reading 100 books a year will cause you to read more noise. This goes with a concept that I first came across while reading the book Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb a couple of weeks ago, known as the noise bottleneck. Most people believe that the more information they consume, the more signal or valuable information they will attain. Nassim points out that when the volume of our information increases, our ability to comprehend the irrelevant from the irrelevant becomes compromised. If we read 100 books a year, the percentage of those books that are noise will be much greater than if we read only 25. The fifth reason reading 100 books a year is terrible is that you don't have time to implement or actualize the concepts in the book. As soon as you finish one book, it's on to the next one. There is no time to process the book in a note-taking system, as otherwise you won't be able to get to that sacred number. One of my favorite quotes by Brandon Sanderson in the Stormlight Archives is, "Journey before destination. When reading, the journey of implementing and thinking about the books is the main bulk of the fun. When you put your reading goals to some magical number like 100, you focus on only the destination. You become so wrapped up in reading more that you forget the entire point of reading in the first place. Okay, so now we have gone over why reading 100 books a year is not such a good idea. So the question that remains is what the solution is. What should you do instead of reading 100 books a year? I think a great way to go about this is to explain the difference between bad, good, and great books. This is a differentiation made in the fantastic book called How to Read by Mortimer J. Adler, which I have an entire book summary on up above. Great books can give you new insights every time that you read them. Books like Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle, Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, or other pieces of classical literature. Good books serve their purpose. Bad books don't have a logical structure and are not made well. Unfortunately, most books are good or bad. Very few are great. Reading 100 books a year is unnecessary as there are barely even 100 great books. Remember, these are the pinnacles of human insight. These are books written by some of the greatest minds that have ever existed. There are not many of them. Great books are much larger and more challenging to read than summaries of how-to books, which forces you to understand them and come out with the thinking processes behind coming to the conclusions instead of being given them. Most great books are above the average person when it comes to their thinking, making them some of the best things that you can read. Reading great books then takes an insane amount of time and effort. Often, to get everything out of them, you will have to go back and reread them multiple times. I remember when I first sat down to read Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle and was just so incredibly confused. It was only after that I read it more and more that I began to understand what was even happening in a chapter. Reading 100 books a year essentially makes this impossible. If you have even one great book on that list, that goal of understanding them is not gonna happen. Either you will not get to your goal, or even worse, you will skim through the great book and lose out on the insane amounts of insight and wisdom it is trying to share. Adler shares a great analogy in How to Read to convey this point. Suppose that you know in advance you will be stranded on a desert island for the rest of your life, or at least for an extended period. Suppose too that you have time to prepare for the experience. There are certainly practical and helpful articles that you would be sure to take with you. You will also be allowed 10 books. Which ones do you choose? This imagined situation seems bizarre and unreal when you begin to think about it. But is it so unreal? I don't think so. We are all, to some extent, persons marooned on a desert island. We all face the same challenge that we would face if we were there. The challenge of finding the resources within ourselves to live a good human life. We simply can't read every single book that we want to in our lives. We can certainly try by reading 100 books every single year, but there are literally millions of books, meaning you would have to be alive for a pretty long time to do so. I have a link down in the description to the book How to Read by Mortimer J. Adler. At the end of the book, he shares with us lucky readers a synopticon, a list of some of the greatest literary works that have ever been put on this planet. I urge you to get the book, not only to read, as it's great in itself, but to use the list as a way to find great books. I wish I could give it for free, but I couldn't find any other list as comprehensive or valuable as the one shown in the book itself. The way I like to think of it is that it's barely $14 on Kindle and $11 on paperback. It's the same amount of money you would spend on one takeout meal, and it will change your life forever. Be sure to check out my video called Don't Read Another Book Until You Watch This Video. I go through all of the things that I wish I had known before starting my reading journey. As always, have a great day and bye-bye.